We're going to break into Arts 24 now to go live to Paris, where the French President Emmanuel Macron is giving his final pre-Bastille Day speech to the armed forces. Let's listen.
Secretary General for Armaments, Secretary General for Administration, Chiefs of Staff, Director General of the National Gendarmerie, Military Governor of Paris, General Officers, Directors, Officers, non-commissioned officers, petty officers, aviators, mariners, and civilian officers of the army, ladies and gentlemen. I'm particularly proud and happy to be able to see you today here at the Hôtel de Brienne, in this place that is heavy with history, where Clemenceau organized the victory after the First World War, and also where de Gaulle stood as the head of provisional government. It is the ninth time that I've had the pleasure to stand here in front of you. 9 years ago, I announced a turning point, a historical turning point for our armed forces. Many people had forgotten forgotten that this was possible and had gotten used to repeated budgetary cuts. But I realized that we needed to be audacious in order to move forward. I stated that the defense budget would go up and that we would hold our commitments, and that France and its armed forces would meet their commitments and responsibilities. I fixed a clear goal to attain by 2025 defense spending of 2% of the GDP. I committed to this solemnly here because I was convinced that the world's perils meant we had to strengthen our armies, because our nation could always come together in order to defend freedom when that was necessary through force. And I remember the heroes of Valmy, the poilus of Verdun, and the other brave soldiers. We have held our commitments, and that is a good thing. Before Sahel went into chaos, before the Middle East was set on fire, before war came back to the European continent, we had started rearming. Before the launch of this insane war that Russia is waging against Ukraine, before all the turbulence that we encounter today, we had ensured the strategic autonomy of France and Europe. Strategic autonomy, that is the independence in our analysis, in our action, in our strategies. That is the very meaning of our freedom. This is what makes France a singular exception in the concert of nations. France refuses the spirit of what the strange defeat was. France speaks out to the world. France is a free nation. We have kept our promises, and you can see it in the facts. Last year, in this very same place, I said we had needed to go faster and stronger. In order to be free, we needed to be feared, we needed to be strong. Not out of pleasure, but out of necessity. We're not doing this because we want to, but because that is our duty, as Marc Bloch stated. So I fixed the goal of accelerating the ambition that we first had from 2030 in order to reach a budget of 74 billion euros by 2027. 64 billion euros is an increase of 200% of the budget in 10 years. We have committed to that, and that will be done. Yes, we met our commitments. The facts are there. The history will judge us. I wanted to commend the work done by the Minister of the Army and the Veterans, Madame Catherine Vautrin, and the National Assembly, which adopted the Act for Military Modernization and did this in the spirit of agreement and responsibility. I'd like to also thank your predecessors who allowed us to be able to respect these budgets. 36 billion euros will thus be committed with three great priorities: to strengthen our military stock and to accelerate our operational readiness. We will also strengthen our early alert system, solar defense. We will strengthen our nuclear deterrence program in line with our strategic program announced last March, with the setting up of advanced deterrence. We will also increase the Army's capacity to carry out combat operations as of right now when it comes to drone warfare, electromagnetic warfare, quantic drones, artificial intelligence, and so on and so forth, on top of what was already voted in 2023 with maritime and cyberspace actions. This must have direct results, and the first deliveries will take place this year. We need to strengthen the resilience of the nation through the new program of early warning systems and the national service, which will start in September. This will allow us to consolidate this strength of spirit that I talked about here a few years ago. This is a necessity. It is a necessity, as we can see in the Arabian Sea, where our Navy has been working for many months. It is deployed as it has been after 4 centuries of service for France. I'd like to commend our mariners who have been deployed for long months and their leaders. Nicolas Vaujour, the Admiral, who will, after 37 years of service at sea, will pass on to his replacement a Navy that he can be proud of. Thank you, Admiral, and good luck to your successor, Admiral Christophe Cluzel. The Coalition of the Willing will meet this afternoon at the Invalides Palace in order to take the actions necessary to defend Ukraine that is defending its sovereignty and its freedom. And as a consequence, it is also defending our security in Europe. I'd like to thank the General Fabien Montour, the National Secretary of the Army's Chiefs of Staff, for everything that's been done in the last 18 months on that front. And I'd like to commend our soldiers who are deployed in Romania, our land forces, who once again healed the call. General Pierre Schill, you who directed the infantry and prepared it with a clear understanding of a command based on subsidiarity and trust, thank you, General, for your work. And good luck to your successor, General Jacques Langlade de Monroe. We know what is at stake when we see our partners in the Arab Emirates, in Jordan, when they see the strength that is ours on land, on sea, and in the air. And I'd like to thank our pilots and our engineers and mechanics under your command, General Bélanger. Yes, everyone in that region could take full stock of how you can depend on France's commitments to defend their security. France is a trustworthy and stable partner that respects its commitments and defends a very clear line of non-belligerence when it comes to conflicts that France did not choose, the line of respecting international law, of freedom, including the freedom of navigation that we will ensure in the Strait of Hormuz. And this is the same will to enforce the respect of the freedom of navigation that has pushed us for 8 years to adopt an Indo-strategic strategy, and which explains many of our success stories in that region. The line of defending our interests, the interests of our friends everywhere in the world when it is necessary. And I'm referring to recent punctual deployments such as in Finland, as well as more long-lasting deployments in Estonia, in Lebanon, in Iraq, for example. In all the theaters where our external services are working, you can see what is at stake. And I'd like to thank our different directorates, as well as their leaders who work for our national security and interests. We see the full need of this work in our country through the Sentinelle operation, which is ongoing and mobilizes our armed forces, and through the work of the gendarmerie, whose work you can see everywhere on the French territory. Through the fog of war, France is not alone. Quite the opposite is true. Well anchored in Europe, but also projecting its strength worldwide, we work through a federation of coalitions, and we showed this a few years ago through the different operations that we worked on in Africa with our allies. And more recently, we built the coalition of willing with our British colleagues. And I'd like to honor this tomorrow when we see the different soldiers parading together and showing how our European armed forces can take their destiny into their hands and bring together so many different European nations, as well as Canada and the other democracies of the Indo-Pacific region. In a few years, we will have strengthened our capacities and build new capacities in Europe and orchestrated a new strategy. Europe is becoming a power based on the different states that are members of it, committed to act in a united manner. This is a Europe that is not that of nationalism, but a Europe that will bring together the patriotic spirit of its members to make it stronger, and by acting in a united way. The message we send to the world is the following one. Yes, peace is our goal. Yes, we cherish freedom and law. And yes, we are ready to fight to defend these principles, always and forever, and to pay tribute in blood if necessary. This price, this hard price paid by our soldiers who have died for our country or been wounded on the battlefield. And I'd like to spare a few words for the mourning families who have lost loved ones. I'd like to also spare a thought to our wounded and their families, and also to the veterans, the National Invalides Center. Our nation thanks you, and France will never forget the names of our fallen and wounded. We will also never forget our veterans who have been kept alive in our memory, who have driven our commitments, and I'd like to thank the main associations and federations of veterans. I'd also like to commend the work done by the Minister Delegate, Madame Alice Ruffo, to improve the support for wounded soldiers with more coordination and a more humane approach. Once again, we have fulfilled our commitments. I'd also like to draw the greatest attention to service conditions. These last years, various efforts have been deployed to remedy the economic conditions that harmed our armed forces in the years before. The nation knows what we owe our soldiers and their families, and to defend ourselves, we need the best of our citizens in all the different jobs, from combat positions to support. We need to be able to attract people to this profession. We need to give them good pay and good conditions. So I'd like to thank as well for the Commission working on service conditions, for their work and for their vigilance. And I'd also like to thank the Secretary General of the Armed Forces, the Senate, and all the heads of departments and the ministers for their vigilance. I've had high ambitions for the armed forces since I've been President of the Republic. I'd like to honor all those who have made the choice of defending France, our interests and our values everywhere in the world. This commitment of being available at any time and everywhere, on land, at sea, under the sea, in the skies, this courage they have, this self-sacrifice, this commitment to be able to carry out missions, whatever the price may be. I fully measure how much this impacts the lives of our soldiers and their families. Service conditions go hand in hand with rearmament. These two concepts are indissociable. What's at stake here is consistency, trust and efficiency. And that is why I've ensured to improve military pay, the situation of the conditions of their families and the wounded. That's why I will always remain vigilant, to make sure that the living conditions of our soldiers and their families, including their housing conditions, be improved. That's why I have committed in 2027 to make sure that there are premiums that are added to military pensions. I know that this measure has been long awaited. I know that I can count on the mobilization and the vigilance of the Prime Minister, Mr. Sébastien Lecornu, who is much attached to our armed forces, as am I. That is why I will pay close attention to the fact that the Military Programming Act's dispositions be respected, because they are an essential piece of our rearmament puzzle. Rearming also includes the efforts carried out by the Directorate General for the Armaments, and thank you very much, the Secretary General, and of our private sector, who will continue to innovate. Given all the threats, our entire defense industry needs to be mobilized in order to become more agile, to be able to answer the issues at hand, to be able to continue to innovate, to position itself, to know when to recenter itself and be able to produce at high volume weapons when those are needed. The war in Ukraine and the risks identified by a national strategic review show that today it is not just the stock of armaments, but the flow thereof that defines the strategic situation in Europe. We need capacity to produce enough armaments to be able to discourage our adversaries. Ukraine gives us a spectacular lesson in that regard. But let us be clear-sighted. We have taken many initiatives. We have reinvested as we've never done before. We've relaunched a wartime economy 4 years ago. But is that enough? No, it is not. Faced with international competition, faced with acceleration in all the different fields at play, faced with new adversaries, we need to continue to invest in European public funds, in French funds as well as private funds. We need to innovate. Our military industry needs to be able to take more risks. They need to be able to take more risks and to produce faster as well. They need to mobilize European programs and funds. And they need to do everything in order to build European standards and a true European preference. This also holds true in space, as was well shown by the strategic review that was carried out. The summit organized in a few months will help us to take stock in this field, but we need to continue to accelerate. The Bromo operation is supported by the government. We need to create more synergies in order to make this operation, as well as others, bear fruit. And we need to innovate together within European standards. The same is true in many other fields. SCAF was perhaps not a success, but we should not stop here. New competitors will appear, and we need to move forward when it comes to advanced technologies, to early warnings. We need to build our own solutions with advanced deterrence. We need to move forward when it comes to combat heavy tanks. We need to make sure that Europe becomes an active industrial military reality. If we flatter nationalism, we make a grave mistake when it comes to our own history. Patriotism, yes, but nationalism, never. And at this time when Europe is rearming, folding back on our national challenges and our national prerogatives would be a mistake. We need to work together. And we must learn from history. We also have to recognize that when it comes to drones, interceptors, and munitions, we do not produce fast enough. We do not produce at the right volume. And we need to adapt for our own needs. I see our armies working for the capacities that have been promised them for many months sometimes. We need to give them solutions. And the same goes for our foreign partners. We cannot ensure their defense if we can only deliver them in 5 or 7 years, because competitors are there who will deliver tomorrow. So we need to invest, we need to take risks, we need to move fast. I'm counting on our industrialists to act in order to make this new order real. We also need to mobilize our SMEs, our startups, the whole of our ecosystem in order to produce better and more everywhere in France. We have had historical orders in the last years when it comes to exports, and so we need to double our efforts and our expectations. I also want to commend the commitment and the work of the French youth that answered the call to join our ranks in September by carrying out their national service in the ranks of the armed forces. I've called together the heads of the armed forces to congratulate them, and I'd like to congratulate them for carrying out this project that I announced last year in Vars. It's essential to strengthen our spirit, to consolidate our strength, and to improve our reserve forces. We know that within the challenges of national mobilization, there are different goals, and one of them is to double the number of reservists. Dear compatriots, soldiers, naval officers, airmen and women, we have done a lot to strengthen our armed forces and will continue to do it, because a static army would be a defeated army. And in this moment, a pivotal moment, we need to anticipate the coming shocks and the coming needs. We need to be strategic, and we need to feed a forward-looking vision. I will soon take the floor at the 150th anniversary of the military college. Yes, we need to prepare the wars of the future, but let's make no mistake. Our capacity to fight these wars will depend on our credibility today. It is today's wars that we have to win. We need to hold the strong on the Ukrainian front. We need to stand by our partners in the Middle East. We need to have the capabilities to be partners In Africa, we need to have the capability to stand strong in the Indo-Pacific region too, and this is what will determine our capacity to meet our commitments for 2030. Everything is at stake today and here. Everything that was done in the last 10 years has made us stronger. But let us be humble. Let us be demanding towards ourselves, because much is to be done. So today, on the eve of our National Day, which will bring together our nation at Place de la Concorde in Paris to pay tribute to our soldiers, I stand here in front of you today in order to tell you and to repeat to you how determined I am, how thankful I am towards you, and how proud I am to be here by your sides and to have been here since 2017. This is my greatest pride. You have my trust. Long live the Republic and long live France.